I'm Dr Louise Newson. I'm a GP and menopause specialist, and I'm also the founder of the Newson Health Menopause and Wellbeing Centre here in Stratford-upon-Avon. I'm also the founder of the free Balance app. Each week on my podcast, join me and my special guests where we discuss all things perimenopause and menopause. We talk about the latest research, bust myths on menopause symptoms and treatments, and often share moving and always inspirational personal stories. This podcast is brought to you by the Newson Health Group, which has clinics across the UK dedicated to providing individualised perimenopause and menopause care for all women. So here we are in your very smart studio.
Thank you.
I feel very honoured that I'm actually here doing my podcast in your space with your amazing team.
Oh, I love it.
It's really grown up.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to really introduce you because people know who you are. You've been on my podcast before. And I think when I last did you on the podcast, I said, really want to have you back. And now you're here.
Yeah.
I hope this isn't going to be the last time.
No,
that you're on
I
the
hope
podcast.
not. I'm sure it won't be.
And we've known each other for a little while now. And it's really inspirational, all the work you're doing. And I just love seeing what you do and how you do, and you're still so happy, which is wonderful.
I appreciate that.
I'm here in London, and you've given me just lovely lunch. No one ever cooks me lunch. No one understands.
No one cooks you lunch, even at home. Oh.
No, my husband doesn't cook.
Oh, well, like I said to you on my pod, anytime you're in London, you come down here,
definitely.
we've always got some grub.
It always tastes nicer when other people do it. It really does. So, yeah, but the power of food has been underestimated for far too long, and people are now talking about it, but with so much confusion. And there's all this sort of competitiveness over there that you have to have this diet or that diet and read this book or that book. And what I really like about your laid-back approach is just enjoy it and be happy. But it's not just the eating of the food. And actually, one of the reasons I quite like cooking is it's part of my phone-free time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%.
Like, so many people have said to me,
100%.
Louise, you're so busy, you should get somebody to cook for you. And it's like there are two reasons that I enjoy cooking. Firstly, I can often talk to my children because they're often milling around the kitchen and I'm there. And secondly, it is a bit of a meditation for me. I quite enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it's not just the eating, is it?
Absolutely. I'm so glad we're talking about this because I think there's a bit of a sort of productivity hustle culture these days of trying to optimize every element of our life.
Yes.
And one of those things that a lot of people have an issue with is the need or the chore of having to cook for themselves.
Yeah.
And I see it through a completely different lens. And granted, I'm privileged in that my mum taught me how to cook before I went to medical school, and I'm an explorative cook, and I love food, and you know, I'm a true foodie. But I also use it as part of my sort of well-being lifestyle medicine package because, just like you said, phone-free time, music on, spices at the ready. You know, just sort of getting into my flow, not really thinking about the day. I don't think about my to-do list when I'm cooking, and if I really think about like the reason why I cook, yes, it's to nourish, and yes, there are functional benefits, but it's that sort of emotional connection that I have with the ingredients that I'm using, and the sort of historical and the sort of cultural basis for the food that not just is something that's passed down from my family, but it's something that I can actually have an influence on with my own family going forward as well. Like I love the act of cooking for other people. I'm like a typical we just did lunch for you guys, did lunch for the crew.
It's a great feeling, isn't it?
I love it. It's so strange.
I'm not very sociable because I work a lot, but I often invite people to my house because I like the privacy of being able to say anything. Obviously that's really good and nice, but also I like to be able to share different foods, but actually cooking isn't that difficult. I don't mean to be...
No, it's not. It doesn't
but a lot of people seem really scared, and often really basic things, but you just add a bit of colour or some herbs. Be like, oh my goodness, but you've been working all day. Yeah, but I prepared it last night. It just sort of cooks itself. It's not... Sometimes it's not difficult, is it? But it's so easy now to, on an app, just deliver something or to order something. But it tastes different when you've prepared it somehow.
Totally.
And it so I think there's so much about eating is really important. We'll talk about things to eat, But I do think we shouldn't. I mean, I'm really up for life hacks. I'm really up for maximizing my productivity. I'm really happy for someone else to do my washing. I'm really happy for someone else to do the ironing.
Yeah.
Someone else can clean the toilets. That's fine. That's not going to make me a better person. But actually, some people do like that whole ritual of cleaning, so that's fine if they do. But I actually personally would prefer to write some papers and do something else. But actually, cooking is really important because I want to know what's in my food. I really want to know, because I don't want to have any additives. I don't want to have anything that's going to trigger migraines. So I have that as I've said to you before, I'm lucky, but I'm not lucky having migraines because they control my life. But I love not having a headache. So I'll do anything, including eat really healthily, to not have a headache.
Totally.
So it's not just because I want to feel good or look good or whatever. It's because I really don't want to be flawed with migraines.
Yeah.
So I'm obsessed because I don't want to have chemicals that I don't need. But actually, it's really joyful to be able to cook. And we have a veggie box delivered because, again, one of my hacks is I don't like going shopping because I don't have much time.
Yeah.
But I want to eat really healthily. And I know veggie boxes are expensive, but I don't have any waste.
Yes.
But I also like the mystery. I never look and see what's going. And so it came on Wednesday. My husband was at home and I came back on Wednesday night a bit excited because, like, what am I going to cook? And he said, oh, it didn't come this morning. I said, what do you mean it hasn't come? Anyway, he put it all away, which he doesn't often. So I was like, open the fridge and it's like opening a sweetie cupboard. Really. And I thought, oh, this is really exciting, actually, because it's all in season.
Totally.
And that makes a real difference. And it's really sad. Like, if I'd met you 10 years ago, I could not talk with excitement about a veggie box.
Yeah.
Actually, eating in season is cheaper as well, isn't it? And it just makes it easier.
Totally, yeah. And it's so funny that you're saying that, because I think part of the excitement that I have around cooking is actually, what am I going to cook? I'm not one of these people, even though I've got, like, recipe books and people love recipes and following the instructions and all the rest of it. I get that. I'm a really sort of intuitive cook. So kind of like you, open up the store cupboard or go into the pantry or look into my fridge and figure out what to make. So what I made you earlier today, I didn't know that I was going to make that. No. So it literally, I was using odd bits of what we'd made in recipes earlier this week. So there's a bit of grated courgette. There was leftover white beans. Everything was in date. Don't worry.
Thanks. That was much. Glad you made big effort for your guests.
We had a big mix of herbs. I used some frozen peas and frozen spinach, which are my two life hacks. I think really good items to always have in your freezer, and then some veg stock. And a whole bunch of spices that, won't go off as long as, you haven't got them in your pantry for like years and you smell them and they smell aromatic or they smell fresh and they've got that sort of odor, the pungency that they should have, then you can still use them and they confer lots of benefits. That's sort of like how I made that meal. So I put everything into one pan. I blended up the spinach and the peas with a little bit of hot water and veg stock to create that like green, glorious looking silky sauce. Added that to the ingredients, added the protein. So we added a bit of halloumi, but it could be pan-fried tofu instead as your plant-based protein. Some beans, you could add lentils, you could have leftover chicken if you like. And that is a meal in one pan. And so there's minimal washing up. You can serve people and it tastes delicious. So when you know the sort of basics of flavor, and it doesn't need to, you don't need to be a Jamie Oliver to be able to do this. Just learn some basics and you'd be surprised at how enjoyable it is and how flavorful it can be, and the functional benefits as well.
And I also like, you're the same as me, you cook more because then you can open your fridge when you're hungry and there's something there for you to eat. And that's really important.
And you spend less.
Of course you will.
Absolutely spend less. We did this exercise actually with BBC Food that people can look at right now. You just type in BBC Food, budget meals, doctor's kitchen. And we did this project where we looked at, it was at the height of the cost of living crisis. It was November last year, something like that. And we looked at all the different supermarkets. It was this like a big spreadsheet of all the different common ingredients that you find. Things like mushrooms, they're quite expensive actually. Beans, whatever veggies were in season. And I was tasked to get a £1 per serving meal that was healthy and delicious and flavorful and easy to cook. And we managed to do it, £1 per serving, and it's three proper portions of vegetables
great,
in every serving of these meals. And we got it down to a meal plan as well that you can get on the BBC website or the Doctor's Kitchen website, where we spend about £20 per week. And the hacks, the reasons why you're able to achieve that is if you have 12 key spices, and they're very simple things: cumin, paprika, chili flakes. I think there was some Mediterranean herbs and spices in there, like oregano. If you've got those 12 and you've got some olive oil, chef's knife, chopping board, a decent pan, you're on your way.
Yeah.
You're on your way.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of exercises challenge me to really think about, okay, if I am in dire straits, if I do only have £20 per week to feed myself and another person, can I do it? Yes, it is possible, but it does require that sort of culinary creativity, the ingenuity, and the effort needed to produce those kind of meals.
I mean, my oldest 2 children are at university, and I batch cooked a whole bolognese for them.
Yeah.
I split it up and gave it to them recently when I've just met them, and they were so excited. But I had put loads of vegetables and lentils in it. But if I gave especially my middle daughter, a bowl of lentils, there's no way on earth she'd eat it. But she was sharing with her friends. She goes, "Oh, there's something. Was it peas in there?" I said, "No, it was lentils, Sophie." But it makes it cheaper. It spreads the meat, and it's really healthy still as well.
Totally.
So I think modifying things is really important. Knowing that it's cheaper, but also, I don't drink alcohol because of migraines. My daughter doesn't because of migraines. She's a student. So sometimes she will go and buy a nicer piece of meat or something that's slightly more expensive because it's cheaper than going and buying a pint of beer.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to sort of rethink about our budgets.
Yeah.
It's like, do I get more pleasure from a glass of wine, or do I get it from and when you eat really good food, it will make you happy. It does improve your serotonin levels, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. When you're eating better food, you're getting more diversity of ingredients. We know that that's going to be supporting your microbes. And it's simple things like spices that have a higher antioxidant score. You have simple diversity of different types of fibers as well. It could be some simple things like celery or radicchio or radishes or endive, whatever you can find. I know I've just said some bougie ingredients there, but kale.
But celery
stems. Celery is not that
dirt
bougie, is
cheap.
it?
And actually, a lot of people think, what's the point? It's just water. But it is really good, isn't it?
It's interesting. So we did, I used to think the same thing about celery. That's just mainly water. Yeah. There's nothing in it. So we do know it's got some prebiotic fibers in there, which is really
just
good
explain what prebiotic, because lots of people get confused.
Totally, yeah. And that's a really good point. So you got different types of fibers in your diet. We get them from a variety of different sources. Largely carbohydrate, or you find them in plants. And the different types of fibers are prebiotic, and you've got other sort of just regular fibers as well, and different types of starches. Prebiotic fibers are unique in that they can improve the how your microbes in your gut thrive, and essentially uniquely improves that gut flora that you find mainly in the large intestine. So the types of fibers that we think of with regards to whole food ingredients that have these unique fibers are asparagus, chicory, things like garlic as well, brassica vegetables. These are really, really interesting sorts of fibers. But within the sort of category of prebiotic fibers, there are hundreds of different subtypes as well, many of which have long names like oligosaccharides, for example. And it is a fascinating world when you go into it. And the best thing about it is that they are a lot cheaper than some of the gut health supplements that you find on the supermarket shelves. Yeah. And prebiotics is actually where we need to put a lot more of our attention rather than just probiotics. Probiotics are fantastic. I love fermenting. I love adding, sauerkrauts and kimchis, all those wonderful live microbes to your food. But prebiotics is probably where we're lacking a bit more. Yeah, so
it's important to know the difference, isn't it? Because they're both really important for us. And I think for many years, we still don't understand enough about the gut microbes, but we are realising more and more how important they are. So that whole thing of eating the rainbow is actually really important, isn't it? We've got varieties the spice of life, isn't it? I sort of think back about my meat and 2 veg existence in the 70s. Actually, it was going to the butchers for the meat. It was actually eating in season, so it was a lot better than meat and 2 veg now, because food's changed over the years, hasn't it?
Massive.
And so my mum sometimes says, "Oh, but it didn't harm you having that. Why are you doing this for the children?" Because food is different. Definitely. And the soil that the vegetables are grown in is quite different as well, isn't it?
There's a lot of differences, and we did a deep dive into this actually on the podcast with regards to organic versus conventional food. And I don't want to worry anyone, but the two senses, like if you can go organic, great. Does it mean that you're going to be protecting yourself from all pesticides? No. Does it mean that there is a potential benefit to longevity, the quality of the polyphenols, the increase in the amount of these different plant chemicals that confer benefits? Potentially, yes, actually. So if you can, great. But am I going to lose sleep over it if I go out and I'm eating conventional vegetables? No, I'm not. And the variety piece I think is really important as well, because I think there's a difference between surviving and thriving. And I think when you get that rainbow, you are thriving. You are really pushing the boat out in terms of improving your health, improving your well-being, improving your mental well-being, improving the function of those gut microbes. So that sort of element I think is really important when we discuss food. Going back to celery, so it's prebiotic fibers. Yes, it's like largely water if you want to think about it in that way, but it also has a surprising high amount of nitrates. So nitrates are really interesting because they are constituents in plants that we absorb from the soil. So if you remember back to your sort of school chemistry days, you've got the nitrogen cycle. It's absorbed into plants and then it's converted into nitrates, which is NO3 minus, I think. And that is only absorbable from the plants that we consume. It's added as an additive to things like processed meats, which is where nitrites get a bad rep. But when it's nitrate in plants,
it's quite different.
Combined, with those polyphenols, vitamin C, vitamin E, that's where it can be better converted into nitric oxide. And that nitric oxide is what vasodilates our blood vessels, so brings the blood pressure down, improves blood flow through the brain as well, cardiovascular benefits, as I mentioned, with blood pressure, and also metabolic effects as well, strangely enough. So celery is actually one of those things that we should be getting, as well as kale and other cruciferous vegetables that are quite high in nitrates, and beetroots, which is the classic nitrate-rich food.
Yeah, it's not interesting. And you know what else also affects nitric oxide production, of course, is estrogen. And so when you think about cardiovascular health, anything that we can do that keep the lining of the vessels open, reduce atheroma, is really important, isn't it? So thinking about food as medicine, but not medicine to treat disease, but prevent disease is really important. And I'm going to put this podcast out in January. So it's new year, new you. We're all thinking about New Year's resolutions, and it's always about what am I going to stop? I'm going to, reduce alcohol use. But actually, I'd like some tips about what can I add? What will I add to my foods? Even if I don't change my diet, what would you say would be really important to think of over the year to just add to improve health?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first thing, just taking one step back, is New Year, New You is that always that sort of difficult time of year where people are jumping onto a particular trend, or with the purest and righteousness of intentions, it's like, this is the year I'm going to do better. And I get it, I completely get it. But I think if I could welcome people to just take a step back and just think of the key metric that will enable you to live and thrive for life, it's consistency. It is pure consistency. So if you can think about food through the lens of, can I add just one more fruit, vegetable, nut or seed at every mealtime? That's a really good way of introducing a tiny habit that has vast implications.
So just like a handful of seeds. Handful of nuts. Doesn't matter what nuts.
Doesn't really matter. No. I mean, like, I have a personal favorite, which is hazelnuts. I think they're like really easy. You can use them in savory. You can use them in sweet. They're beautiful toasted, blanched, whatever. Like, I just think,
and they're quite cheap actually.
They are,
because nuts are really expensive.
They can be. You
buy
get
a small bag, it's like, oh my goodness. But actually, hazelnuts. And I was cooking your aubergine. There's an aubergine, and you said, you can use hazelnuts. Gosh, hazelnuts with the aubergine. That's a bit weird. But it's great. And actually, it's a really quick way, isn't it, of transforming, like you say, sweet or savoury. So, so seeds, nuts, spices, herbs, but they don't all have to be fresh, do they?
They don't always have to be fresh. Actually, I think dried herbs are particularly interesting because they're dehydrated, you're getting a lot more bang for your buck, and they actually preserve quite a lot of the nutrients as well.
Okay, so that's
you
good.
Get a different flavour profile.
Of course you do.
So like with fresh tarragon that's finely chopped over, I don't know, some eggs or scrambled tofu or whatever, it's going to taste completely different to dried tarragon, which has a more intense sort of pungent flavor. But you are introducing like a quarter plant point, you're introducing more antioxidants, and you're having a higher diversity of those antioxidants as well in your food, which is really, really important. So wherever possible, I always say experiment with spices, experiment with herbs. It's really, really interesting. Particularly when you look at it through the lens of what the diversity of those different ingredients are adding to your microbes. I always like to tell people to think of their microbes as like bored children on a summer holiday. You need to feed them interesting bits of information from in the medium of food to keep them activated, to keep them thriving, so they can do all those
really
wonderful
analogy,
things.
isn't it?
So bored kids in summer holiday, give them loads of interesting things to.
But that's why I think it's
them.
really important when I said about adding, because I've seen so many patients who said, yeah, I'm really not eating much at all. And then you hear what they're eating, like, oh my goodness, that's not only really dull, but you're just starving yourself, actually.
Yeah.
And they're counting the calories, and the calories, might add up to whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not really about calories. It's about the enjoyment and actually, these people often feel hungry all day. So all they're doing is thinking about food.
Yeah.
It's like once you say you're on a diet, the only thing you think about is food. So I think we should be looking at food in a different way, isn't it?
I think like the calorie side of things is really interesting because we know that energy balance, yes, is important. We know, yes, that if you were to maintain a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. But what I'm thinking of is the consistency. And this isn't just a plan for January to March. It's a plan for life. Yeah. And is calorie counting a good exercise for most people? I would say no, it doesn't. Is it effective for weight loss? Is it great for bodybuilders? Is it great for people who have the need to do it, athletes, etc.? Yeah, great.
That's very different, isn't it?
Very different for a real world sort of scenario for people who are just looking to feel better in themselves, improve their mental clarity, improve sort of other aspects of their life. It's not all about calories. So that's sort of like my 2 cents on calories. And I think I'm glad we're talking about what you can add to food, because I have this sort of idea of like, okay, what are 60-second hacks that everyone can do to improve the nutrient density of their food? So one is, adding nuts and seeds to each meal, chopping up some sort of dark leafy green and adding that to either your breakfast, lunch or dinner. Yeah. Good from the nitrate point of view, great from the anti-inflammatory point of view as well. Adding any sort of spice in addition to your spice. If you're using fennel, use cumin. If you're adding cinnamon, add chili. There's a really interesting sort of spice wheel that you can just get a PDF of. Just type in spice wheel, and it will give you pairings of different spices that you can use. So if you've got a recipe and it calls for oregano, look at the spice wheel and say, okay, what else can I add to that? Can I add a fennel seed? Can I add a cumin to that? Can I add a sumac? Does that give me sort of like a reason to pick another spice bottle up from the supermarket? You're always going to be adding some antioxidant to it, and it's a really, really nice little hack.
I like that. Yeah.
And the other thing I would say in terms of additions is, even if you've got a spag bowl like you're saying your daughter's, can you add lentils to it? Can you add pre-cooked chickpeas? Can you add some sort of legume to your diet that's going to be increasing fiber? Because where there appears to be some sort of marketing hype around protein and ensuring that we are protein replete, which most of us are, I would say, we're really fiber deficient. Yes. Because a lot of our diet is refined. Yeah. And a lot of the sort of the husks around our rice, the wholeness nature of our grains has been polished down. And so actually we need to be thinking about where we can add fiber. So legumes, lentils, pulses, these are great ways to add, not necessarily removing the meat if you don't want to, but certainly adding it to it. Yeah. Again, adding to your diversity score and adding to your plant points as well.
I think that's really important, isn't it? I think it's so easy just to strip things back and punish ourselves, which we really shouldn't. But obviously we've got to talk a bit about perimenopause and menopause. Whereas you can't come onto a menopause podcast and not talk about that. But people find that their diets do change in the perimenopause and menopause, but some of it I think is a age related rather than a hormone related. So I'm a menopausal woman, obviously, and I take hormones, but actually I can't eat the same as I ate when I was 20. That's not because I'm menopausal. That's just because my metabolism is different. And sometimes it's really easy to sort of almost blame the menopause, or there's so many people that try and eat their way out of the menopause.
Yeah.
And then I feel sorry for these people, because how can you eat to replace a missing hormone?
Yeah.
You can't, but of course you can eat to feel better.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be really clear that it's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there have been studies showing that if you reduce spicy food, you can have less hot flushes. Now, is hot flushes more important than spicy food? And actually, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where it comes back to choice.
Yes,
Like,
totally.
I might say, do you know what? I want to have a flush because I want to eat this food.
Yeah.
But actually, more importantly, why am I having a flush? What can I do about that?
Yeah.
But even more importantly than that, as a menopausal woman, regardless of my hormonal status, how am I going to try and eat the best for my metabolism?
Yeah.
And is my metabolism different because I'm menopausal, or is it different because of my age, or is it different because I exercise differently? Like, how do we know when you're deciding what to eat?
Totally, yeah. And it's interesting because we were talking about this, because I asked you the same question around weight and stuff, and we were talking about how, you know, when you are menopausal, not to get too depressed about it, it's your fat cells are going to be bloated, and they're going to increase them because of the estrogen content of those, which is that low dose sort of estrogen analog. Which is why you get that middle-aged spread. Your testosterone level is going to be low, so you're not going to be able to, you're going to potentially be at worse risk of sarcopenia, which is that breakdown of the muscle, and a higher amount of fat, both visceral and subcutaneous. And then you're going to have cognitive issues, which means you're going to be less motivated to go to the gym. So that could also lead to weight. So there's all these other things. So like we were talking about, it's taking a step back and just appreciating that your body is in a state of flux, and it's a different ball game. That being said, last time we were on the pod together, I told you about the app and the health goals that we had, and you were like, do you have a menopausal health goal? And I was like, no, we don't, but we've been working on it. We've been working on it a lot. So we did a deep dive into the dietary patterns that are associated with better menopausal health outcomes from a symptom point of view. And we also looked at particular ingredients as well, which I think are interesting, but not necessarily universal for everyone, because there's a study regarding prunes, and it apparently improved vasomotor symptoms in 80 women in an RCT that was done in Iran. And you know, that's just prunes, and it's prunes, and it's got a lot of sugar. They're usually dried. It's not going to be for everyone. No. There's only so much you can take from that. So when we look at the studies, we blend sort of the bigger ones. The biggest one I think is the most important is the DII. So it's the dietary inflammatory index, which again is another health goal, inflammation reducing. And the things that move the needle on the DII, which is this validated food score, are things that we've just been talking about. So spices, which have the highest antioxidant score as measured by something called the ORAC, lentils and pulses, and those colorful vegetables as well. So if you're packing your diet full of those, you're reducing your inflammation index, and that potentially is going to reflect better on typical symptoms of the menopause, whether it's vasomotor, whether it's also osteoporosis as well. There are some really interesting studies looking at that. Generally, like I said right at the start, it comes down to consistency. Because a lot of people, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, about how, for you, it's kind of like a blessing and a curse that you have migraines and it's related to processed food. It means that on a Friday, I
can't slip up.
You can't slip up. You can't just order that takeaway pizza. No. You can't just have a Mackie D's or whatever. No. Like you gotta be strict, because there's a stick,
absolutely.
A lot of people don't have that.
No.
And I think it's a good thing that people can indulge in junk food, but it really comes down to the consistency. Can you consistently go for that 80-20?
Yeah.
Or like I say, 90-10. Because if you aim for 90-10,
then it slips.
You probably get to 80-20. Yeah. So that's super important. Yeah. What do all these diets really mean? It's basically having a lot more fiber in our diets, mainly from things like legumes, pulses, and those dark green leafy vegetables. Having lots of different herbs and spices, again, lowering the inflammation index, and having a predominantly plant-based diet as well. Doesn't mean that you need to be vegan or vegetarian, but the more plants in your diet, the better. there was also an interesting study looking at protein. We talked a bit about protein before. So there appears to be somewhat of a protective effect of plant-based proteins on menopausal symptoms, not so much animal-based proteins. There doesn't appear to be any effect at all. Now, does that mean that we all need to start eating tofu or tempeh? Not necessarily, because not everyone likes tofu or tempeh, and it doesn't necessarily mean, because nutrition, as we were saying, is very, very complicated. There's so many issues with the quality of the research. But certainly having more hemp seeds in your diet, that's a very good source of plant-based protein. Having a lot more nuts and seeds, again, very good sources of plant-based protein. Raw cacao, actually, is one of my favorites, really high in plant-based protein, and is one of those that has all 9 essential amino acids, which is quite rare for a plant-based protein. I was going to say tempeh again. It's actually one of my favorites. I think having tempeh in your diet is actually quite a good plant-based protein.
And it's interesting because you say about all of these will help reduce inflammation. So that is also showing it's not just about symptoms, because I think when we're looking at menopause as long-term, because it's associated with inflammation. So whether we take hormones or not, we want to reduce inflammation because we want to reduce disease.
Yes.
So it's interesting that these foods that you're talking about, so whether someone's listening and they have 1 symptom or 21 symptoms or 51 or none, it's irrelevant actually, because it's thinking about inflammation as well.
It's a really good point. And I'm glad you're doing a deep dive into inflammaging, because I think that should become a lot more sort of widely known, because it is something that will affect everyone.
Of course, it does.
As you grow older, and sarcopenia being a big issue and very much related to that. And just getting some sort of practical tips into people's head. What does this look like? What does a DIY friendly diet look like? What does a Mediterranean friendly diet look like? It could be as simple as like a sweet potato, lentil, feta, and pomegranate diversity bowl. It can be a plant-based sort of take on a chicken masala with like air fried. I know I'm a big fan of air frying. I know I'm going to convince you, because I know you've got an aga, but like air fried tempeh or air fried tofu, and adding that into the base of a rich sort of tomato sauce that's got loads of those different spices in, and adding spinach to that. It's like the lunch that I made you earlier, the spinach and pea green sort of silky sauce that you can throw anything into it. We threw beans in it, lentils in it, and we added some halloumi that we just lightly fried. So getting really explorative about your food and actually enjoying this phase of where you're experimenting with all these different elements that we know reduce inflammation, improve your gut well-being, and improve your likelihood of thriving into old age.
Which is so important. So before we finish, there's always 3 take-home tips.
Okay.
So new year, new you, reduce inflammation, increase fibre. What are the 3 things? Not just for people who are menopausal, but for whole families, because I strongly feel we shouldn't be eating different things to others because we're hormonal or menopausal or whatever.
Definitely.
We should be converting everybody around us. So family, friends, whoever steps in our houses should be looking at our cupboards and fridges and learning.
Definitely.
So what are the 3 things that you think we should all be proud of that we've changed this year for our food?
I think it's not always food related in my mind, but I think everyone should master like one meal that they can sort of add on different sort of journeys to, choose your own adventure sort of meals. So having a really solid base, it might be like your favorite meal, like a spag bowl, and then adding twists to it with different vegetables, different types of legumes, different sort of other sort of flavor bases, different types of, the actual pasta itself. There's loads of really good sort of edamame based pastas, for example, that I think are great. So I think mastering one meal and being proud of that and actually getting everyone involved in that. I think particularly if you have kids, I get asked this a lot. If a child, particularly in their formative years, doesn't like a particular ingredient, don't force it, because that will introduce animosity towards that ingredient. And naturally, there's a lot of evidence to show that kids will be averse to certain bitter flavors as a sort of an evolutionary protective measure. So when you come back to it when they're older, they may have developed different taste buds that will allow them to appreciate it better. I always hated mushrooms until I was a teenager, and I started having mushrooms again. It was delicious. So, and luckily my parents didn't force mushrooms on me. So like when you've got kids, I'd always like just be a little more gentle about it. And I would say if you can go for that 80-20 or the 90-10, go for 90-10, because you probably will get to 80-20. And I think that's worth just harboring again, because a lot of people feel that you have to be 100% strict. And if you do have a cheeky takeout, or you do have that sort of can't be arsed feeling, you know, at the end of the week, indulge, allow yourself to indulge without any guilt, particularly as it pertains to food, and then make yourself a contract, make yourself a pact to get back on it the following day. And you know, it could be, you know, whatever meal you like, as long as it's packing it with those high fiber ingredients, lots of variety, and hopefully getting some spice and herbs in there.
Great advice. Thank you ever so much. And thanks ever so much for your time and the loan of your studio.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I can't wait till the next time.
Me too. Thanks. You can find out more about Newson Health Group by visiting www.newsonhealth.co.uk. And you can download the free Balance app on the App Store or Google Play.